The first time Senior Chief Marcus Whitfield raised his hands in his own driveway, there were 6 rifles pointed at his chest. It was 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. He was wearing pajama pants, a faded navy t-shirt, and one slipper. His coffee mug sat steaming on the porch railing. His golden retriever Bishop was barking from inside the house. Across the street, standing on her perfectly manicured lawn in a silk bathrobe, Patricia Hollings was holding her phone up, recording, smiling. It was the 28th time she had called the police on him in 14 months. It would be the last. Let me tell you about Briarwood, Virginia. Briarwood sits about 12 miles outside Charlottesville, tucked between rolling green hills and the slow brown ribbon of the Rivanna River. It's the kind of suburb where the streets have names like Oakhaven Drive and Dogwood Lane, where every other house flies an American flag from the porch, where on summer evenings, the air smells like cut grass and charcoal smoke and honeysuckle. In the summer of 2019, when this story begins, Briarwood was the kind of neighborhood where folks left their garage doors open, where the same mailman had delivered the mail for 19 years, where kids rode their bikes until the streetlights came on and nobody worried. You could hear the distant hum of a lawnmower on a Saturday morning, the wind chimes on Mrs. Patterson's porch, the screen door at the Whitfield house creaking open every morning at 5:30 sharp when Marcus and Bishop walked down to the end of the cul-de-sac and back. That was Briarwood, that was home. And then Patricia Hollings moved in. Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Whitfield, United States Navy, retired. 25 years of service from 1995 to 2020. SEAL Team 4, then SEAL Team 6, 3 deployments to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan, 1 to a place his daughter still doesn't have clearance to know about. Bronze Star with Valor, Silver Star, 2 Purple Hearts. The kind of chest of medals a man earns and then puts in a wooden box in the hall closet because he doesn't want to think about what each one cost him. Marcus was 52 years old in the summer of 2019, 6'1", shoulders still squared from a lifetime of carrying weight no civilian could imagine, hair shaved close, going silver at the temples, a small scar above his left eyebrow that he'd brought home from Ramadi. He'd bought the house at 245 Oakhaven Drive back in 2008 when he was still active duty. His wife, Diane, picked it out. She was a high school history teacher. She loved the big oak tree in the backyard, the one she said reminded her of the one she'd climbed as a girl in South Carolina. Diane died of pancreatic cancer in the spring of 2017. 62 days from diagnosis to the end, Marcus held her hand the whole time. After she was gone, he kept the house exactly the way she'd left it. Her cookbooks on the counter, her reading glasses on the nightstand, the rose bush she'd planted by the front porch, a deep red variety she had named Diane's Promise. He had a grown daughter, Naomi, who lived up in Washington, D.C. She was a lawyer, and a good one, though Marcus rarely talked about her work. 2 grandkids, Eli, age 7, and Maya, age 4. They came down most weekends. Now you see, folks, Marcus wasn't a loud man. He never had been. The men who had served with him, and there were not many left, would tell you he was the kind of operator who spoke 3 sentences in a 6-hour mission and every one of them mattered. He restored vintage Ford Broncos in his garage. He read poetry, actual poetry, Langston Hughes and Robert Frost on his porch with his coffee. He still kept in touch with one man from his Navy days, a Marine named Tommy. They'd been on a rooftop together in Mogadishu in 1993, back when Marcus was barely 26. Marcus had carried Tommy out of that city on his back. They didn't talk about it, but they called each other every Christmas, every birthday, every Memorial Day. That detail will matter, folks, hold on to it. Marcus had nightmares sometimes, insomnia, walked his dog before dawn because the quiet of the streets reminded him he was home, that he was safe, that the war was finally over. He was a good man, a quiet man. And in Briarwood he was loved. Mrs. Patterson down the block brought him a casserole every other Sunday because she said no man should have to cook for himself after losing his wife. The Garcia kids, back when the Garcias still lived next door, used to ride their bikes up to his porch and ask him to tell them stories about ships and oceans. He never told them anything about combat. He told them about dolphins he had seen at sunrise off the coast of the Philippines. About a sea turtle the size of a coffee table that he had once watched lay her eggs on a beach in Guam. He was the kind of neighbor that, when his snowblower was running on a January morning, ended up clearing 4 other driveways before he was done. He never asked, he never mentioned it, he just did it. That was Marcus Whitfield in the summer of 2019. That was the man Patricia Hollings decided to ruin. The moving truck pulled up on June 14, 2019. A pearl-white 2019 Range Rover autobiography followed it into the driveway of 247 Oak Haven Drive, the colonial right next to Marcus's house. The previous owners, the Garcias, had moved to Florida to be near their daughter. They had waved goodbye through tears 2 weeks earlier. The driver of the Range Rover was Patricia Hollings, 54 years old, real estate agent. Brown bob cut sharp at the jaw, sunglasses pushed up on her head, a cell phone permanently fused to her left hand. Her husband, Gerald Hollings, was a corporate compliance attorney for a pharmaceutical firm down in Richmond. He commuted 3 days a week. The other days, he stayed in their condo in the city. Their marriage, the neighbors would later learn, was a polite arrangement that had stopped being a marriage years ago. Patricia stepped out of the Range Rover, took one long look at the cul-de-sac, and immediately frowned at Marcus's truck, a 1972 Ford Bronco he had been restoring, parked in his own driveway. She walked across the lawn without introducing herself. No hello, no handshake. She stopped at the property line, pointed one manicured finger at his Bronco, and said the first words she ever spoke to Marcus Whitfield. "That eyesore is going to have to move." Marcus, who was sitting on his porch with a mug of coffee, looked up slowly. He smiled the way a man smiles when he is deciding whether something is funny or sad. "Good morning to you too, ma'am," he said. She turned and walked back to her house without another word. That afternoon, she filed her first complaint with the Briarwood Homeowners Association. By the end of the week, she had nominated herself for HOA president. By the end of the month, she had won. Now let me pause here and ask you something. Have you ever had a neighbor who decided, before they even met you, that you didn't belong on your own street? If you have, drop a comment below and tell me your story, because what happened next to Marcus Whitfield is something a lot of folks have lived through. They just don't always live to tell it the way Marcus did. The first complaint was about the Bronco. Patricia claimed the truck was abandoned and lowering property values. She was informed by the HOA board that a vehicle parked in a private driveway, registered and insured, was not within their jurisdiction. The second complaint 2 weeks later was about Marcus's American flag. She claimed it was too large and not properly maintained. The flag was a standard 3x5-foot American flag. It had been hanging there for 11 years. The third complaint was about Bishop, his golden retriever. She claimed Bishop barked excessively. Bishop was 12 years old, mostly deaf, and slept 18 hours a day. That's when Marcus walked over. It was a warm Saturday in late July. The cicadas were screaming in the trees. The smell of someone's barbecue drifted down the block. Marcus crossed the lawn slowly, carrying a small wicker basket, Diane's old basket, the one she used to take to the neighbors when she made her famous peach cobbler. He had baked one from her recipe, the first one he had made since she died. He knocked on Patricia's door. She opened it about 3 inches, looked at him through the gap, and said, "Yes." "Ma'am," Marcus said, "we got off on the wrong foot. I just wanted to come over, introduce myself properly. My name is Marcus Whitfield. I made you a peach cobbler, my wife's recipe." Patricia looked at the cobbler, looked at Marcus, looked back at the cobbler. "I don't eat sugar," she said. And then she added in a voice loud enough that Marcus's neighbor across the street, Mr. Patterson, would later swear under oath he had heard it from his garden. "Listen, I don't know what kind of neighborhood you came from, but this isn't it. We have standards here. Maybe you'd be more comfortable somewhere else." She closed the door. Marcus stood on her porch for a long moment, the cobbler still warm in his hands. Then he walked back home, set the cobbler on his kitchen counter, and sat down at his dining room table. He pulled out a leather-bound notebook, the kind he had carried in the Navy, the kind he used to log mission details. He opened it to the first blank page. At the top, in steady block letters, he wrote, "Patricia Hollings, incident log." Then he wrote down the date, the time, and exactly what she had said. You see, folks, Marcus had spent 25 years learning one thing above all else. You don't fight a battle you haven't documented. Over the next 8 months, the calls began. July 30th, 2019, Patricia called the Albemarle County Sheriff's Department to report a suspicious man walking in the neighborhood at 5:45 a.m. The man was Marcus Walking Bishop. The deputies, who already knew Marcus, apologized for bothering him. That was call number 1. August 12th, she called to report Marcus's grandson Eli, age 7, for trespassing because his soccer ball had rolled onto her lawn. August 28th, she called to report loud noise from Marcus's garage. He had been sanding a fender at 2 in the afternoon on a Saturday. September 9th, she called to report him for blocking the sidewalk while unloading lumber from his truck. He had been parked in his own driveway. September 22nd, she filed an HOA citation claiming Diane's Promise Rose bush was in violation of landscape standards. When the HOA board inspected it, they found nothing wrong. They voted unanimously to dismiss her complaint. She called for a recall vote of the entire HOA board. October 4th, Marcus came home from the grocery store to find his front yard sprinklers running. He had not turned them on. The timer had been manually changed. There was no evidence of who had done it, but his water bill that month was $340 higher than usual. October 19th, Bishop disappeared from the backyard. Marcus found him 3 hours later, locked inside the tool shed at the back of the property. The latch had been thrown from the outside. Bishop was shaking. November 3rd, Election Day. Marcus walked down to the polling station at the elementary school to vote, the way he had voted in every single election since he was 18 years old. When he came home, somebody had taken his American flag down off the porch and laid it on the wet grass. He picked it up, he folded it the way he had been taught, 13 folds, each one with meaning. He carried it inside. He bought a new pole and put the flag back up the next morning. He did not tell anyone what had happened. He just added it to the leather notebook. November 27th, Thanksgiving. Naomi and the kids drove down. Patricia called the police 3 times that day to complain about excessive vehicles parked on the street. Officer Maddox showed up at 7 p.m., looked at Marcus's full driveway and said, "Mr. Whitfield, please tell your daughter Happy Thanksgiving from me, and save me a piece of that pie." December 14th, Marcus woke up to find every single one of Diane's Christmas lights cut down off the front of the house. The wires had been snipped clean with what the police later determined to be wire cutters. Patricia, when asked if she had seen anything, said only that those tacky lights had been bothering her for weeks. There was no proof, there never was. That was the day Marcus installed the cameras. 8 of them, 4K resolution, night vision, motion activated, cloud backup, complete coverage of his property and the surrounding street. He had helped design surveillance setups in Iraq that were less comprehensive than what he installed around 245 Oak Haven Drive. He did not tell anyone, he did not put up a sign, he did not post about it on the neighborhood Facebook page. He just installed them. And then he waited. By the end of January 2020, Patricia had called the police on Marcus 17 times. Every single call had been determined to be unfounded. Officer Trent Maddox of the Albemarle County Sheriff's Department had personally responded to 9 of them. He had started bringing Marcus dog biscuits for Bishop. "Mr. Whitfield," Maddox said one afternoon, standing on Marcus's porch in the rain, "I'm sorry, I have to come out every time she calls. That is the law." "I know you do, son," Marcus said. He was holding 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to the officer. "How's your boy doing? Still playing Little League?" That was Marcus. "Now let me ask you something, folks. How many times would you let a stranger weaponize the police against you in your own home before you stop trying to be the bigger person?" Because Marcus had a number in his head, he had not said it out loud, he had not even written it down, but he had a number. And he was getting close to it. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning in March of 2020. Eli and Maya had come down from D.C. to spend the weekend. Naomi had a deposition that ran long, so she had dropped them off Friday night. The kids were excited. Marcus had promised to take them down to the creek behind the house to look for tadpoles. It had rained the night before. The morning was bright and cold. The grass was still wet and the smell of damp earth hung in the air. Eli was wearing his rubber boots. Maya was holding a small plastic bucket. Marcus had just stepped out the front door with them, locking it behind him, when he heard Patricia's voice from across the street. Hey, get away from there. He turned. Patricia was marching across her lawn in a pink tracksuit, phone up, recording. She was screaming at the children. You don't belong here. Where are your parents? I'm calling the police. Eli, who was 7 years old, started to cry. Maya hid behind Marcus's leg. Marcus stepped in front of them. He did not raise his voice. He did not move toward her. He simply stood there, blocking her camera's view of his grandchildren, and said, These are my grandbabies, Patricia. They've been here 100 times, you know that. She kept recording. There is no record of children at your address. You're harboring suspicious minors. I'm calling the police right now. She did. Officer Maddox arrived 12 minutes later. He looked at Patricia. He looked at the crying children behind Marcus. He looked at the bucket Maya was holding. He took off his hat. Ma'am, he said to Patricia, I have known these grandkids for 2 years. I have a photograph in my wallet of Eli holding the badge I let him try on last Christmas. Please go back inside your house. Patricia screamed at him about civil rights violations and threatened to sue. When the police car pulled away, Marcus walked the children inside. He sat them down at the kitchen table. He poured them juice. He told them everything was okay, that they had not done anything wrong, that some grown-ups were just sick in their hearts. Then he went out to the backyard, alone. He stood in front of Diane's rose bush, which was just starting to bud in the early spring sun. He put his hand against the wooden fence she had helped him build the year before she died. He did not yell, he did not cry. He just stood there for a long time, his hand on that fence, his head bowed. And then he nodded. Just once. He walked back inside. He picked up his phone. He called a number he had not called in 11 months. Tommy, he said, it's Marcus, I need a favor. Now, if you think Marcus Whitfield was about to let this go, folks, you have never met a man like Marcus Whitfield. Here's what nobody in Briarwood knew. 27 years earlier, on a rooftop in Mogadishu, a young petty officer, Marcus Whitfield, had pulled a Marine Corps captain named Tommy Ray's out from under a collapsed wall. Tommy had a piece of rebar through his thigh. Marcus carried him 8 blocks under fire to the extraction point. Tommy lived. He lost the leg below the knee, but he lived. Tommy went back to school. He went to law school. He went to work for the Department of Justice. By the spring of 2020, Thomas Reyes was the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. That was the man Marcus called. But Tommy was not the only one. Marcus's daughter Naomi, the one who lived up in D.C., was not just any attorney. She was a senior litigation partner at one of the largest civil rights law firms on the East Coast. Her specialty was Section 1983 federal civil rights cases. She had personally won judgments totaling over $40 million against police departments and municipalities across 7 states. Naomi had been quietly watching her father's situation for months. She had copies of every incident Marcus had logged in his leather notebook. She had backup files of every minute of footage from his 8 cameras. She had public records requests filed with the Albemarle County Sheriff's Department documenting every single false 911 call Patricia had ever made. She had been waiting for her father to ask. That Saturday afternoon, Marcus called her too. Sweetheart, he said, I think we're done waiting. You see, folks, what Patricia Hollings did not know, what she could not have known because she had never bothered to ask, never bothered to learn, never bothered to see Marcus as a human being, was that the man she had been tormenting for 14 months was not a soft target. He was a senior chief petty officer of the United States Navy SEALs. He was the father of a federal civil rights attorney. He was the brother-in-arms of a sitting United States attorney. And he had 463 days of high-definition video footage. He had a leather notebook with every incident logged in tactical detail. He had witness statements from 16 of his neighbors, including a deputy sheriff. He had records of 27 false 911 calls, 27 federal predicate acts, each one of them under 18 U.S.C. Section 241, a violation of the federal civil rights statute. What he did not have yet, what Tommy Reyes was about to help him get, was an answer to one simple question. What did Patricia Hollings actually do for a living? Because here's the thing, folks. Real estate agents make decent money, but not Range Rover autobiography money, not condo enrichment money, not stay-at-home and call the cops 27 times money. Tommy made one phone call to a friend at the FBI's white-collar division. 3 days later, he called Marcus back. "Marcus," he said, "you're going to want to sit down for this one." It was a gray Tuesday morning in October of 2020. The leaves on the maples up and down Oakhaven Drive had turned the color of old copper. The air smelled like wood smoke. A light fog hung in the low places along the street, the kind of morning where the whole world feels like it is holding its breath. Marcus was sitting on his porch at 6:30 a.m. with a mug of coffee and a copy of Robert Frost's collected poems. Bishop was at his feet, gently snoring. Marcus had not slept well the night before. Tommy had called him at 9 p.m. Tommy had said simply, "Brother, tomorrow morning, sit on your porch, drink your coffee, don't move." Marcus had not asked any questions. At 6:45 a.m., 3 black Suburbans turned onto Oakhaven Drive. They were followed by 2 Albemarle County Sheriff's cruisers, and a sedan from the United States Attorney's Office, and an unmarked van. They did not stop in front of Marcus's house. They stopped in front of 247 Oakhaven Drive. Patricia Hollings, who happened to be looking out her bay window with her morning coffee, saw the federal agents getting out of the SUVs, saw the badges, saw the warrants in their hands. She stepped onto her porch in her silk bathrobe, holding her phone up to record because of course she did, and started screaming about her rights. Then she saw Marcus on his porch across the way. Marcus did not get up, he did not look over. He turned a page in his book of Frost poems. He took a sip of coffee. That was when Patricia Hollings, for the 28th time, called 911. She told the dispatcher that the black man across the street had orchestrated a federal raid against her and was holding a weapon on his porch. The weapon, of course, was a coffee mug. The dispatcher had been instructed by her supervisor to specifically record any further calls from Patricia Hollings's phone number. The supervisor had been instructed by her chief to do so by a written request from the United States Attorney's Office. That recording, Patricia Hollings, knowingly making a false 911 report alleging an armed black veteran was threatening her life, became the centerpiece of Count 14 of her federal indictment. The federal agents on her porch were not there for the false police calls. Not yet, they were there for something else entirely. It turned out that Patricia Hollings, who claimed to be a real estate agent, had actually been operating a long-running mortgage fraud scheme for nearly 9 years. She had been steering elderly clients into predatory loans, forging signatures on closing documents, and skimming nearly $2.3 million in fraudulent commissions. The investigation had been ongoing in the FBI's Richmond field office for 2 years. Tommy Reyes' friend at the bureau had simply moved her case to the front of the line. Patricia was arrested at 7:02 a.m. They led her down her own driveway in handcuffs, the silk bathrobe still clinging to her shoulders, her phone still in her hand. She tried to film her own arrest. An agent gently took the phone away. Her husband, Gerald, was served with divorce papers 6 days later. He had quietly filed them 3 months earlier and instructed his lawyer to wait until the right moment. Now let me ask you something, folks. Have you ever seen real, honest, federal court of the United States justice catch up with somebody who thought they were untouchable? Because I'll tell you what, there is no sound on earth quite like the sound of a federal warrant being read out loud on a quiet suburban street at 7 in the morning. The civil suit came 48 hours after the federal arrest. Naomi Whitfield, on behalf of her father, filed in the United States District Court for the Western District of Virginia. The complaint alleged civil rights violations under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, conspiracy to violate civil rights under Section 1985, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, and a pattern of racially motivated harassment. The damages sought $4.2 million in compensatory and punitive damages. The case was assigned to a federal judge who, after reading the complaint, watching 12 hours of camera footage, listening to all 28,911 recordings, and reviewing Marcus's leather notebook page by page, called the matter, and I am quoting from the published court order, one of the most thoroughly documented patterns of racially motivated civil rights abuse this court has reviewed in a decade. 18 months later, after Patricia Hollings had been convicted on 23 federal counts of mortgage fraud and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, the civil case settled. The number was $1,847,000 in damages, plus all legal fees, plus a permanent injunction barring Patricia Hollings from ever residing within 5 miles of Marcus Whitfield for the remainder of his natural life. Marcus did not attend the settlement hearing. He was at home that afternoon, planting new bulbs around Diane's rose bush. The morning Patricia was arrested, the street stayed quiet for a long time after the SUVs left. Mr. Patterson came out of his house first. He stood on his porch in his slippers, just looking. Then Mrs. Lynn from 2 doors down, then the Garcia's replacement family, the Doyles, who had moved in the previous spring. One by one, the neighbors of Oakhaven Drive came out into the cool morning air. Nobody said anything. They just looked at Marcus's porch, where the senior chief was still drinking his coffee, still reading his Frost. Then Mr. Patterson walked across the street. He climbed the steps of Marcus's porch. He sat down in the empty rocking chair that had been Diane's. "Marcus," he said quietly, "I am sorry." Marcus closed his book. He set it down on the small table between them. "For what, Hank?" "For not doing more, for not standing up for you, for letting it go on as long as it did." Marcus thought about that for a long moment. He looked out at the empty street, at the moving truck that he knew, even then, would arrive at 247 Oakhaven Drive within a few weeks. "Hank," he said, "you did do something. You answered when my lawyer called. You signed the affidavit. You told the truth." He paused. "That is all anybody can ask of a neighbor." 3 weeks later, the moving truck did come. Patricia's daughter, a college student at UVA who had been horrified by her mother's behavior for years, came to oversee the packing. Gerald Hollings did not appear. The Range Rover had been repossessed. When the truck pulled out of 247 Oakhaven Drive for the last time, nobody on the street came out to wave. Nobody, that is, except Marcus. He stood at the end of his driveway, hands in his pockets, watching the truck go. The daughter, whose name was Hannah, paused at the property line before getting into her car. She walked over to Marcus. Her eyes were red. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, "I am so sorry for everything my whole life. I am just so sorry." Marcus looked at this young woman, 20 years old, carrying her mother's shame like a weight she had never earned. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "you don't owe me an apology. You weren't the one who hurt me." He reached out and he hugged her. She cried for a long time on his shoulder. That, folks, was the kind of man Marcus Whitfield was. It is now the autumn of 2025. Marcus Whitfield is 58 years old. His hair is fully silver now. He still walks Bishop at 5:30 every morning. Well, the new Bishop, a rescue golden retriever he adopted after the old Bishop passed peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 2022. He still lives in the house on Oakhaven Drive. His grandchildren, Eli and Maya, now 12 and 9, spend most of their summers with him. He is teaching Eli to restore engines. He is teaching Maya to bake using Diane's old recipes, the peach cobbler, the cornbread, the chocolate cake she always made for his birthday. The house at 247 Oakhaven Drive is now owned by a young Marine Corps veteran named Sergeant David Ockhafer, his wife Lainey, and their 2-year-old son. They moved in 2 years after Patricia left. Sergeant Okafor served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He calls Marcus sir and means it. Their son Joshua calls Marcus Granddaddy Marcus. Patricia Hollings is currently inmate number 18,774,053 at the Federal Correctional Institution in Alderson, West Virginia. She has 6 years remaining on her sentence. She has never written Marcus an apology. She has never publicly acknowledged what she did. According to court filings, she still maintains that she is the victim. Gerald Hollings remarried in 2023. He sends Marcus a Christmas card every year. Marcus sends one back. Officer Trent Maddox was promoted to lieutenant in 2024. He still stops by Marcus's porch on his way home some evenings. They talk about Little League and old cars and the way the country used to be. Tommy Reyes retired from the Department of Justice in 2024. He has a fishing cabin on the Chesapeake. Marcus visits twice a year. They do not talk about Mogadishu. They never have. And Diane's rose bush, the one Patricia had once tried to have sighted, the deep red roses Diane had named Diane's Promise, well, that rose bush is now 7 feet tall. It climbs all the way up the side of Marcus's porch. Every June, it explodes with hundreds of dark red blossoms. Marcus cuts the first one of the season every single year and lays it on Diane's grave. He has not missed a year. Now let me say this to you folks before we go. There is a lesson in the story of Marcus Whitfield. It is the same lesson that has been taught 1,000 different ways by 1,000 different storytellers, but it is worth saying again. The world is full of people who will look at a quiet man and mistake him for a weak one, who will look at patience and call it fear, who will see a person of color or a senior citizen or a working man with grease on his hands and decide, because they have nothing better to do with their privilege, that this person doesn't belong, doesn't matter, doesn't deserve the same dignity they demand for themselves. Those people exist on every street in America, maybe on yours, maybe on mine. But here is what those people never seem to learn. The quietest man on the block is often the most dangerous one to underestimate, not because he wants to fight, not because he is looking for trouble, but because he has spent his entire life learning the difference between a battle worth losing and a battle worth winning, and he will not waste a single minute of his peace on the first. Marcus Whitfield did not want a war with Patricia Hollings. He wanted a quiet street. He wanted to drink his coffee in the morning and walk his dog at dawn and watch his grandbabies grow up under the oak tree his wife had loved. She gave him no choice but to fight, and so, the way he had been trained to fight for 25 years, he fought. He fought slowly, he fought patiently, he fought without ever once raising his voice. And he won. So if you take anything from this story tonight, let it be this. Never mistake a quiet man for a weak man. Never mistake patience for permission. And never, ever pick a fight with a veteran who has documented every single thing you have ever done to him. This story is inspired by real events and public court records. Names, locations, and specific details have been changed or dramatized for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental.